when we identify ourselves as Pakistanis, we ask a question as to who we are. And if you go back into history, the Indus water civilization defines us as a people. Whenever I go abroad, I often tell my counterparts that we are the people of Indus Valley Civilization. Our identification is that we are people based on the banks and tributaries of the mighty river Indus.
अच्छा जी, ऐसा है क्या?
मकबूजा कश्मीर में दहशतगर्दी के वाक़या के बाद इन्होंने ये ऐलान किया है कि वो इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी को नहीं मानते। हम इनका ये फैसला को नहीं मानते।
Stop it. Get some help.
This is Mohenjo-daro. Its central stupa and sprawling brick foundations belong to a Bronze Age culture that rivaled the scale of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. Because ruins like this are located in modern-day Pakistan, global textbooks have spent a century presenting this entire empire as a Western Pakistani heritage. It is named after the Indus River, the vast waterway running through this valley, long assumed to be the sole lifeline that made this urban boom possible. But the absolute largest settlement built by this civilization is nowhere near the Indus, and it is not in Pakistan. It is Rakhigarhi, located deep inside modern India. Covering approximately 550 hectares, Rakhigarhi outgrows Mohenjo-daro by a wide margin. It is a massive, continuously inhabited metropolis that eclipses the Western capitals. Finding the largest city of a 5,000-year-old empire in a different country shifts the entire center of gravity to the east, far from the river that gives the civilization its name. Early 20th century excavations mapped roughly 40 sites, clustered heavily in Western territories. Then came 1947. A line was drawn across the subcontinent, splitting the land. That new border happened to enclose nearly every known archaeological dig within Pakistan. Because Mohenjo-daro and Harappa were the earliest finds, they dominated the curriculum. Textbooks locked in this early data, presenting the Western footprint as the definitive map. But independent India began its own surveys. Archaeologists started digging into the vast unexamined earth to the east of the border. The global historical consensus was built on incomplete data. A fluke of 20th century timing and political geography hid the true map. The original 40 sites rapidly multiplied into 100, then 500. Today, researchers have identified over 1,000 distinct settlements. Roughly 80 to 90% sit on the Indian side of the border. The physical bulk of the civilization is firmly in the east. The engineering of these eastern sites is remarkably sophisticated. Dholavira features massive stepped reservoirs cut into solid rock to harvest water. Further south, the port city of Lothal reveals immense brick dockyards, linking these eastern populations directly to a global sea trade network. This immense density of eastern cities presents an immediate geographical problem. They are entirely disconnected from the Indus River. Instead, hundreds of these settlements trace the path of the Ghaggar-Hakra. Today, it is a dry paleo-channel, but 5 millennia ago, this was a massive flowing river system. Around 1900 BCE, the climate shifted, the monsoons weakened, and the Ghaggar-Hakra slowly dried up, forcing the abandonment of the cities that depended on it. The death of this specific eastern river triggered the collapse of the civilization's densest populations. Looking exclusively at the Indus misses the environmental reality that actually ended the empire. This geography is not settled history. It is a highly active, constantly evolving frontier. In 2018, excavations in Uttar Pradesh yielded elite burials containing wheeled carts and copper swords, proving the physical record is still being expanded today. Meanwhile, the ruins themselves face sharply different realities depending on which side of the border they sit. The early Western discoveries are fighting for survival. Facing severe funding constraints and extreme weather, sites like Mohenjo-daro were heavily battered by catastrophic floods in 2022, accelerating the decay of the ancient brick. Across the border, the Indian government is heavily funding continuous, season-after-season digs at sites like Rakhigarhi, complete with dedicated museums. As these eastern excavations grow, so does an academic debate. Ancient Indian texts, like the Rigveda, praise a mighty, lost river called the Sarasvati. Many scholars argue this is exactly the same waterway as the dry Ghaggar-Hakra channel. While this identification remains heavily contested, it offers a bridge between archaeology and living oral tradition. If the river of the ruins is indeed the river of the hymns, then the legacy of these builders is found not just in the dirt, but in the memory of the people who remained. The archaeological legacy of this civilization belongs to the entire subcontinent, but the sheer weight of the evidence suggests we look east to uncover the buried truth, beginning with the story of the vanished river itself. Any water. For centuries, this region enjoyed a highly specific climate window, providing the exact conditions needed for a massive agricultural society to take root. the Harappan civilization relied entirely on inundation agriculture. Predictable summer monsoons swelled the rivers, spilling just enough water over the banks to irrigate enormous fields without washing away the settlements. That reliable surplus of food funded a sophisticated urban world. They built multi-story housing and intricate civic infrastructure, like this stone-lined reservoir at Dholavira, engineered to capture and store every drop of seasonal rain. But that complexity came with an invisible vulnerability. The entirety of this civilization was balanced on the predictability of a single weather pattern. Then, around 1900 BCE, the rhythm broke. The great urban centers, like these massive brick ruins at Mohenjo-daro, emptied out. The continuous cycle of firing bricks and building walls simply stopped. Along with the physical abandonment of their cities, their written script vanished from the historical record. Early archaeologists assumed a collapse this total must have been the result of a violent, bloody invasion. Modern geology disproves the invasion theory. The rivers didn't run with blood, they simply stopped running entirely. The channels dried up, leaving baked clay where deep water used to flow. If they weren't wiped out by war, it leaves a massive question. Where did millions of people go when their lifeblood vanished? To find the answer, researchers moved away from the dry riverbeds, traveling off the coast of Pakistan into the modern Arabian Sea. This is a sediment core, drilled from the ocean floor. These samples let paleoclimatologists read the region's ancient rainfall. White layers, rich in calcium carbonate, indicate marine life. Darker red bands indicate sediment from heavy rains. These alternating layers create a historical timeline. Reading that timeline reveals a stark shift. The data shows a severe, prolonged drop in the summer monsoons that had historically fed the Ghaggar-Hakra river system. This permanent geological shift completely broke the engine of their inundation agriculture. As the summer rains failed, the climate reacted inversely elsewhere. The winter monsoons unexpectedly strengthened. These new, heavier winter rains fell much further east, closer to the Ganges Plain and the foothills of the Himalayas. Faced with a drying landscape, the Harappans followed the water, migrating toward the shifting rain. Millions of people systematically abandoned their ancestral cities, moving steadily eastward to chase a more reliable source of water. The evidence suggests that what was previously labeled a collapse was actually a highly successful mass climate adaptation. They settled in the wetter environments of the Himalayan foothills and the Gangetic plains, surrounded by heavy vegetation and steep valleys. Survival required a different way of living. The migrating population traded their complex urban centers for decentralized, rain-fed subsistence farming. Without the immense agricultural surplus of the old rivers, they lost the resources to build brick metropolises or maintain a written script. But their culture did not go silent. Instead, they relied on a unique Indian historiographical tradition known as Itihasa. This was the preservation of history, memory, and identity, encoded entirely through oral transmission. Ancient India's oldest composed text, the Rigveda, explicitly memorializes a mighty, life-giving river called the Sarasvati, a river that eventually vanished from the landscape. This disciplined oral tradition served as a living archive. It allowed a displaced people to immortalize the memory of the river they were forced to leave behind, passing it down through thousands of years. To see the final result of this migration, look at the present day. Modern continuity records show that these migrating Harappans form the ancestral base of the vast majority of present-day Indian populations. Knowing this changes how we view archaeological sites like Mohenjo-daro, or this sprawling earthen mound at Rakhigarhi, which sits directly amidst active modern farmland. These ruins represent a massive geographic shift, rather than the end of a people. They are the abandoned homes of a culture that walked east, adapted to a changing Earth, and remains alive today. Let us know what you think about this climate migration in the comments below. And if this changed how you see the map of ancient India, make sure to subscribe.